Okay, so less support, basically.
Right. And then there are others who say, well, it could go even further, like a complete rethinking of U.S. involvement altogether.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, Trump's past statements and actions regarding Ukraine and Putin. He's expressed skepticism about U.S. support for Ukraine before, and he's even, praised Putin's leadership.
Right. Which obviously raised a lot of eyebrows at the time.
For sure. And, his whole approach to foreign policy, it's often been about personal relationships, deal making.
Right. That kind of like businessman diplomacy.
Exactly. So that could definitely mean a very different approach compared to the current administration's stance.
So we've got the current administration taking a really strong stance against Russia. And then you're saying, hypothetically, a second Trump term might mean what? A more hands-off approach.
Yeah.
Or even...
Well, some would even say a more conciliatory one, yeah.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah. And that could mean concessions, things that some people might see as, well, controversial for sure.
Right. A lot of people would definitely have something to say about that. But Ukraine's just one piece of the puzzle. What about the rest of the world? Like China, North Korea. How might those relationships play out in a second Trump term?
Well, it's interesting because if you look back at his first term, Trump often took this, well, some would say unconventional approach to foreign policy. Like he really favored those bilateral agreements,
Yeah.
direct negotiations, often over those traditional multilateral institutions.
Right. More like one-on-one deal.
Exactly. So with North Korea, we could see more of that, more summits, maybe direct talks with Kim Jong-un, trying to strike some kind of deal.
Okay. So that could be a continuation of what we've already seen.
Potentially, yeah. And then there's China. I mean, the trade war, the tensions over Taiwan, all of that suggests that a second Trump administration, well, it could mean a continuation of that confrontational approach. And that, of course, has huge implications for the global economy, for global security. It's a big deal.
Yeah, no kidding. So from potential shifts in alliances to like a fundamental rethinking of America's role in the world, it seems like the international stage could be a very, well, unpredictable place if Trump returns to the White House. But let's bring it back home for a minute. All of this, it's not just happening in a vacuum, right? It has real implications for American society.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the biggest concerns that comes up over and over again in the sources is this polarization. The potential for even deeper divisions within American society.
Which is kind of scary considering how divided things already feel, right?
Actually. And what they're saying is a second Trump term, it could just exacerbate that, make it even harder to find common ground, to address, the challenges that we're facing as a country.
Right, because we're all in this together, whether we like it or not.
Exactly. And on top of that, we can't talk about a potential second Trump term without talking about election integrity. I mean, it's the elephant in the room.
Definitely the big one. Go on.
Well, we saw what happened after the 2020 election, right? All those questions, those challenges. And, it's highly likely that those debates would resurface, and they could be even more intense this time around.
Okay, so more of the same, but potentially even more heated.
Potentially, yeah. And that just further erodes trust in the democratic process, right? Which is the last thing we need.
It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. And speaking of things that could get heated, what about the different branches of government? How might they interact, especially if you've got, say, a Democrat-controlled Congress and Trump back in the White House?
Oh, man, yeah. That's a recipe for some potential fireworks, for sure. I mean, the system of checks and balances, that's the bedrock of U.S. government, right? But what happens when those checks and balances, when they become like flashpoints for conflict?
Right, when the system that's supposed to keep things in check is what's causing the chaos.
Exactly. And that's what some experts are worried about, that a second Trump term, especially with a divided Congress, could just lead to more gridlock, more confrontations, potentially even, some kind of constitutional crisis.
Wow. So we're talking about potential court battles, legislative stalemates, the whole 9 yards.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a